Hey, here I am. I'm otherwise known as Candid Frank, and with me, as usual, is Aaron William Freeland. This is Leaf Talk. It's Candid, it's Frank, it's live. It's here on the Spanglish World Network. You can watch it on Zingo TV, channel 250. You can also download it, and you can make a comment on downloading iOS and Android devices as your option for watching the program. You can also use Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also all smart TVs 2016 forward. And you can check out my YouTube channel, Candid Frank Stanisci 1030, and you can check out all the shows we do on there. They're ready for you to pick up. And the star of that page, or I guess that YouTube page, is Aaron William Freeland, and he's here with me. And I have to tell you, I have to do a lot of begging and pleading to get Aaron to do this with me. His talent and ability is well documented, and many people request, need his commentary because he is one of the most respected selfish Leaf fans that I've ever met.
Wow.
Look at that
Oh,
face.
well
Look at
done,
that
Frank.
face. Only a mother would kiss. My mother wouldn't kiss mine, though.
That's why she fed you with the
Okay, all
sunshine.
kidding aside, Aaron, thanks for doing this. Yeah, it's the weekend's coming.
Thank goodness.
How's that looking for you?
Uh, Relatively wide open actually this weekend. It is obviously the Easter long weekend for those who observe, which means that on the
You
Sunday
go.
I will be making the pilgrimage to Thornhill to dine with the parental units, as is
Oh, there you
tradition.
go.
Yeah. So we're
Yeah.
past the point now pretending that we're actually observing Christians. So we just
Well,
get together on the holidays.
it when it comes to religion or anything like religion, uh, it's all about a belief system, right? And then the question arises: how much do you really believe what you believe? Is it a belief of convenience, or is it a checklist every week that you want to make sure you check all the boxes, right? And you're doing what you think you should be doing. The challenge of being religious is it can tend to be a little competitive, and I think that's the part. This is a hockey show, so the reason I'm trying to tie this to being like a Maple Leaf fan and a Montreal Canadian fan, right? They refer to the Montreal Canadiens and hockey in Montreal, that NHL team that they follow. They define it as a religion, Aaron. Do
I,
you sense it? Like, is it something that you can actually you feel that it's true? It's not just talk.
No, it's certainly true for Montreal. I know when it comes to the Maple Leafs, there's more of a tinge of lunacy, despair, and fanaticism than there is of faith to it. Um, this is a fan base that hasn't been out of the first round since the early
it's
2000s.
it's less religion, more sadomasochism.
Yeah, really. I mean, we have this desire to punish ourselves, and good Lord, do we ever?
And speaking of sadomasochism, they lost against a team nobody in Leafville wants them to lose to. They lost to them tonight. And Edwards, the play by play guy, goes, the Maple Leafs get better officiating. If I'm not
I
mistaken, the Leafs took more penalties than the Bruins did last night. In fact, they
well,
even got a penalty called in overtime.
here's the thing. I think Jack was a little upset because Brad Marchand got 2 minutes for doing Brad Marchand things um, during a play skating along the blue line. He knocked a player's stick out of his hands, and you can't do that. And he did it right in front of the referee, which is another you can't do that. And the
Can,
referee actually got booed when he sent Marchand to the box
can,
for it.
can I do my impression of the referee?
Sure.
Here's my impression of the referee on that. Now, it's very subtle, so you got to make sure you watch everybody, anybody out there. That's my impression of the referee, because that was the stick.
Yeah.
It went about, I guess, 12, 16 feet,
Easily, and it's
and at
it's one of
least
those
8
things
feet
that's
in the air.
kind
At
of
least
kind of
8
hard to
feet,
miss.
at least 8 feet in the air. Now, if I remember correctly, the last time I saw a player throw a stick that far, He got a suspension. His name was Borja Salmi. Mind you, this one didn't go into the crowd, but if it had gone the other way, it would have made it into the crowd just like Borja Salmi's toss.
I was about to say the last time I remember seeing something like that, Zdeno Chara did it.
Oh, yes,
But
yes, yes.
I don't think Chara got 2 for that one. I think he just sort of got a stern looking at when the ref realized he probably wasn't going to get a signed stick at Christmas. So, it is what it is.
So talking about the game, unfortunately, if you look at a game that you lose 2-1 in overtime, and you look at the goal that made it 1-1, the 5 best players the Leafs could have put out there were out there except for Marner.
It was one of those situations where you had almost everybody on the ice that you wanted to have on the ice, and unfortunately, bad bounce. And next thing you know, the puck's in the back of the net. It wasn't like the Leafs got outplayed.
Hell no.
The shots were relatively even at 33 for Boston and 32 for the Maple Leafs. Both teams were 0 for on the power play or 100% on the penalty kill.
The last goal happened when they were at a disadvantage and the penalty just ran out.
Yeah.
So in essence, as we referred to that as a power play goal because the player, the defensive player was not able to get back in the play. But I agree with you. It was a great game by the Leafs. They played playoff hockey. They gave themselves another indication of how this group works together. Lafferty was, I think he was the best player on the ice for the Leafs.
Lafferty was absolute dynamite. That hit that he laid in the corner to get AJ Greer to drop the gloves at about 14:30 of the first period it was a spectacular hit. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't from behind. It wasn't a headshot.
It was a shoulder-to-shoulder hit, man.
Yep, and it was in that zone about 3 to 6 feet from the boards where if you lose your balance, things can go sideways in a hurry. PLD, Pierre-Luc Dubois, is very well known for doing that sort of thing. Unfortunately, his hits in that area are usually dirty. We can talk about that a little bit later. But in this particular instance here, the hit that Lafferty lay on Grisslick wasn't from behind, wasn't illegal, just good, solid shoulder-to-shoulder contact. And AJ Greer, as so often happens in the NHL these days, felt that he had to fight a player after a good hit. So,
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that, and I think that's a nice segue, and we'll jump to that one if you don't mind. And I don't mean to surprise you, but it's that very topic of in the playoffs, come this playoffs, that play will lead to a penalty. That's what they're talking about. That you cannot hit somebody just because you can't pick a fight with somebody just because you don't like the clean hit he just dispensed on somebody. That's going to be a penalty in the playoffs. I like the idea. I always have liked the idea, and I think it's important that that's what happens. And here's why I think it is, and it's real simple. That what you're doing is you're saying, you know what? Don't worry about making a clean hit, guys. You don't have to fight the biggest guy on the other team if you make a clean hit. We're going to see, as much as fans like fighting, Aaron, I contend, and I maintain that not only are clean hits as entertaining as fighting, we don't want to eliminate them from the game as much as we do fighting. Now, again, I understand that's a qualified statement on my part where fighting is something that is almost adored by some and tolerated by many, right? But clean hits, we all agree. Anything that fosters a clean hit, Lafferty's not really a fighter. We saw him try to fight. It would insert some hitting into the game and clean hitting. The referees are there to call the dirty hits. And the only reason that thing went sideways, like you said, is I think, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, the player that got hit. He was surprised about the contact and he kind of lost his balance and started to fall towards the boards. It wasn't a hit that was directed towards the boards. In fact, the motion, the hit that he gave was about 45 degrees to the boards. Would that be a fair statement on my part?
I think so, yep.
So how do you...
sorry, go ahead.
No, how do you feel?
As it turns out, and this is what I appreciate about this, as we're getting closer to the playoffs, you're going to see more playoff-style officiating. So As it turned out on that particular play, AJ Greer, who was the individual who went confetti gloves on Sam Lafferty, ended up getting 2 minutes for instigating, 5 minutes for fighting, and a 10-minute game misconduct, or a 10-minute misconduct, sorry, for going confetti gloves on Sam Lafferty for a perfectly legal and clean hit. So you are starting to see that sort of thing coming in.
And is that maybe what Mr. Edwards didn't like, that his team got a penalty for starting a fight? You
It's
have to
entirely
understand his
possible.
thinking, right?
I,
You know,
I,
he
I think
Go ahead, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think it's entirely possible that he's starting to realize that the Bruins aren't nearly as untouchable as they used to be. They're also one of the oldest teams in the league.
Well, history tends to create a past. And there were many times that the Bruins against the Leafs, they got away with free punches, free those kinds of things where if a Leaf had the audacity or the temerity to lay out a hit, and then they would have to take on three Bruins, punching them in the head. And I said this before, I'll never forget the end of that period when Chara started punching a guy who's probably never been in a fight in Tavares at the side after the final whistle of the period, and nothing was called. So I don't blame Edwards for saying, this is ridiculous. We're not supposed to get penalties. Why are they showing the Leafs equal consideration? This is unfair. This is just not right. I am accustomed in all the years that I've been calling Bruin games to watch us beat the crap out of the Leaf players. It was legal before. What's going on here? What do you mean we can't punch them? What do you mean we can't trip them? What do you mean we can't spit on them? Edwards, dude, reality check. It's time to have a reality check. No, the Leafs, the best thing they did was to raise an alarm, a flag saying, we're not happy with the officiating. And for those that don't like the Leafs, it doesn't matter, Aaron. It doesn't matter, because all I care about are the people of Toronto who are hockey fans after this many years are finally, hopefully, going to not be robbed by real, overt, poor officiating. I point again. Anybody who wants to question this, watch how the Leafs lost the series against Tampa last year. Two interference penalties, of which were illegal hits. By definition, they took away a Leaf goal for the exact same play earlier in the game, and they didn't call it when Tampa did it. 2 series later, Hockey Night in Canada, in their infinite, cowardly, yellow-skinned being, finally mentioned that the Tampa Bay Lightning like grabbing and holding on to sticks, and have the nerve, them too with temerity, to say 3 series in that Tampa's finally getting called for that penalty. And very quietly saying, well, they did it the whole series against the Leafs, the following series, and now finally in this third series, they're finally being called out on it. So it's very important that Toronto people can't be passive. I'm not asking for anything other than protestations, and people should complain about the officiating to the right people. And who are the right people? We have a right to do it publicly. And if it's true, like if we're telling the truth, then something needs to be done about it. If someone disagrees with me, I'm more than willing to listen to their side of the story. But the problem with Toronto fans is because we have we have been so beaten down with such horrible teams when it comes to hockey, that we don't think we deserve anything here in Toronto when it comes to hockey. As far as Leaf fans are concerned, they deserve better. Uh, I admire their loyalty. I am sympathetic to their the travail that they have. It's not easy being a Leaf fan. Everybody hates them because there's so many of them, and they get very little back for their investment. I mean, they got a team that they support better than most teams, and they can't get by the first round of the playoffs. So, the excitement that Leaf fans have, I'm dying to see Toronto fans get really excited. And I'm an unabashed Toronto fan, not Leaf fan. I'm a Toronto fan. And I want to see the people in this community celebrate. And I don't want it to be they can't because they're like the Raptor thing, where they've got to play harder than their other team, be much better than the other team to be able to show that they're better. And I don't think it's right. That's it.
Perfect. I
Your
mean,
turn.
you got to remember as well, Jack Edwards flying off the handle was the same guy that said that Roman Polak deserved to have a broken leg because he was a bad hockey player. He was also the same guy that complained that they blew the whistle for an injured Leaf player, and there should not have been a stoppage in play unless there was a blood or a bone poking through the skin. So, just so you know what sort of an idiot we're dealing with here, that is Jack.
And how much of that is that he speaks like no other? Toronto has Joe Bowen. Joe Bowen's a homer. I don't think he would argue that point. But he does it with less tempestuousness. He's less angry about it. I love Joe Bowen because when he calls a play or a Leaf player, and the referee doesn't even notice that
You
kind of
know,
stuff.
I honestly, when it comes to this sort of thing, I mean, Jack is basically the equivalent of Stephen A. Smith. He's been making horrible calls and saying
Oh,
terrible things about hockey players and
oh,
about other teams in the league for as long as he can remember, and he gets paid very well to do it.
oh, Aaron,
So,
come on. Stephen A. Smith's a little better than that.
well, yeah, maybe.
That was sarcasm. Peas in a pod. No, listen, he works for the Bruins. He gets paid by the Bruins, and he does what a lot of other play-by-play guys do. But he would be on one end of the spectrum, and then you have who would you say is on the opposite end? Which play-by-play guy do you think is totally um, unbiased?
I'd be hard put to find any sort of sports commentator that is not
I
biased.
have to go
Please
a
tell
bit
me.
back. I have to go backwards a little bit. Foster Hewitt.
Possibly, maybe, but again, he has to call for the Leafs, so he was actually pretty much
Well,
down
he
the
had a
middle
good
in that in
explanation.
that
He had a
in that
good
respect.
explanation for why people thought that he was a Leaf fan. His explanation was that when he was in the Gardens doing the game, when the other team scored, it wasn't that noisy. But when the Leafs scored, it was very noisy. So he felt he had to get above the noise so he could be heard because microphone technology wasn't the same then as it is now, you know. So, they do have the ability to drown out outside noise, as you know, and sometimes they're even behind a full glass and it might have a little bit of an opening or it's totally open, but still the microphone's a little different. No, hey, listen, this is called the Leaf Talk for a reason. We talk about the Maple Leafs, and we're unabashed supporters that we want to see the Leafs go to the Stanley Cup because then there'll be a reason to do this show every week. So for me, it's just total selfishness. It has nothing to do with liking anything. Mostly, I'm a Toronto fan, but hey, I want to do a show about hockey, and we do one about the Leafs because that's our turf.
It's something I'd like to point out here, and I'm not sure if this is going to be a shock to anybody, but we are rapidly coming up on a draft class that will very soon contain no one who was alive when the Leafs last made it out of a playoff round. We are
Okay,
we're
wow.
coming up.
I was going
Yeah,
to say, are they drafting 60-year-olds now?
well, we're looking at last time the
We're
Leafs
going to end up.
made it out of the first round was 2003, 2004. So
We're getting to the point. There
we're
was a
getting to the point
birthday.
where
There was a
people will
birthday.
be, yeah,
There was
people
a
will be back and
birthday.
we've never seen
Here
the
it
Leafs
was.
win a playoff round. This is just unbelievable to me.
There
Killing
was
me.
a. There was. I'll get this out. I promise. There was a birthday, and a neighbor of ours was 101 years old. She was asked, "So, what was it like when the Leafs won the Stanley Cup?"
I don't know.
She's trying to remember. She goes, "I think I was only 7." No, hey, all kidding aside, man. Love hockey. Love Toronto fans. You know, one of the reasons why it's easy for many to love the Maple Leaf, it is the representation of our Canadian flag. The Maple Leaf has a very near and dear association with being Canadian. So it's another reason why the Maple Leafs are a team that's well liked across the country because, you know, when you go to Chicago and watch a game and you see the Maple Leaf there, it's just the second best Canadian team that you could see on the ice. And by second best Canadian team, the only other team that as many people will adore and support is the one with the black, red, and white and the maple leaf on it. and that is every time Canada is represented as a country by the best players in whatever group that's showing up. So, that's part of the being a Maple Leaf fan. In that sense, I'm a Maple Leaf fan. Being Canadian, you see my logo, how I feel about the Maple Leaf. I don't think there's any question where I'm from. Um, Now, we talked about the Leafs, the Bruins, a loss 2-1 in overtime. We both agree, to summarize, the Leafs played a great game. They just didn't play good enough. You felt that it was a bounce that basically ended the game. Overtime ended because of a bounce. That's what the playoffs are going to be like. That game had a playoff feel to it for sure. Let's talk a little bit about news and the Canadian Defense Department. What's going on with them? There is such a thing, right?
Yeah, believe it or not, Canada does have armed forces. We also do have a defense department. We also do have a procurement division. However, unfortunately, that procurement division is sadly lacking in manpower. For those who aren't sure what a procurement division is, they're the folk that are responsible for replacing Canada's aging military equipment. Um, 30% of roughly 4,200 positions were unfilled at the end of May 2022. Now this is a widely available published report. A lack of trained resources puts the department at risk of failing to meet defense policy obligations. This is a reference, of course, to the Liberals' 2017 defense policy, which promised to buy much needed new equipment for the military over the course of the next 20 years. So we're talking from 2017 to 2037, including the purchases of warships, aircraft, drones, armored vehicles, and advanced radar. Many of these projects have already been launched, but are currently suffering delays, which means that the military is forced to continue to use obsolete equipment and in some cases retire their gear before replacements already. It is one of those situations where, unfortunately, supply chain issues and procurement issues have had a much longer lasting effect than expected, and it's only been exacerbated by the pandemic.
Well, the country of Ukraine is basically a disposal place for old weapons. I could see whether they're useful or not. If they're useful at all, you can see them ending up there. That war is completely being supported by a lot of older equipment that NATO has. It's important. It's important that Canada be up to date. The good news is the fact that Finland's in NATO now is something good for us, right? Because that creates a longer border where Russians basically, um, you know, there's somewhere else where they shouldn't be. We know that it doesn't matter. They're going to be wherever they're going to be. Let's go to Quebec, and hundreds of thousands remain without power after the deadly ice storm that happened recently.
Yeah, so for those who aren't aware, Quebec did actually get smacked pretty heavily by an ice storm just this past week. There was also a 75-year-old man who passed away Friday after running his generator in his garage during a blackout. This is the third death that has been attributed to the storm that coated southern Ontario, southern Quebec, and parts of eastern Ontario in ice earlier this week. This was in Saint-Joseph-du-Lac in Quebec. He passed away after being taken to a hospital in Saint-Eustache. This is a dire situation for a lot of folk because heavy ice, in some cases up to almost an inch of it, sent tree branches crashing onto power lines, onto streets, onto cars. Guillaume Nassif, who lives about a half hour from Montreal, is among about 500,000 people who have said that he's had to throw out most of the contents of his fridge and his freezer. The water in his pipes has started to freeze. He's had to make sure that every single piece of equipment has been turned off. This all comes back to Quebec not spending enough money on maintaining infrastructure. In much the same way that Texas had issues with their own ice storm a couple of years back. This is the same sort of situation here. Now, Quebec Energy Minister Pierre Fitzgibbon said on a Friday morning news conference that, the strategic assets of Hydro-Quebec have all been maintained. But that's only because we made investments and improvements over what happened in 1998, which was the last time that Quebec also had a major storm, and similar things happened there. There have
Absolutely.
been reports of people dragging barbecues into garages to try to heat their homes that way. It's pretty bad for them. Hydra One, on the other hand, is reporting that there were only about 50,000 customers in Ontario that were without electricity, but they've managed to get most of that back. Ottawa has opened recreational complexes for 8,500 residents who were without power as of 4:30 this afternoon, providing showers and places to charge their phones. They've also received about 1,800 different requests about trees that were in hazardous positions following Wednesday's storm.
Well, good luck to them.
Yeah.
Tough times. They historically, they must be getting good at handling it because they have a lot of experience. Even though the experience, thank goodness, spans over decades, not years. So that in a way is the good news, if there is any. Talk to me about Nova Scotia doctor problems in BC. He's causing what?
Have you heard about Ozempic?
Yes, yes. People like me
So,
should take that. Diabetics.
well, this is the thing. It's a prescription for diabetes and weight loss. Now they've done a great job of spamming the airwaves with their commercials for
Oh,
this
absolutely.
drug. Um, Dr. Gus Grant, who's the registrar and CEO of the College of Medicine, of Physicians and Surgeons of Nova Scotia, has said that he was made aware of a Nova Scotia licensed practitioner um, in BC who was handing out these weight loss prescriptions and selling them to people driving in from the States. Uh, Now, the registration information with the college says that the doctor practices family medicine in Odessa, Texas, and graduated from Dalhousie University in 1977. They have not named the doctor currently, but this individual here says that they're going to be suspending his license because he's giving the drug to people that don't necessarily need it. It's, as you know, some folks in the States are big on the whole weight loss thing. This is
Yeah.
taking away supply from diabetics, type 2 diabetics, and people that actually need it. So,
Apparently, it's very effective.
yeah, apparently, I'm doing the old diet and exercise thing. Other people prefer to use Ozempic instead. That's
I'm
cool.
doing the older take the pills I need to do it.
Yeah,
The
well, there you
lazier and
go.
older version.
Basically, they've suspended the doctor's license on an interim basis and launched a full investigation because based on the volume of the volume of Ozempic that he's prescribing, that's not in keeping with the standards of the profession. Um, the prescribing, basically, they say, appears incompetent, and for his patient's own safety, they're suspending him for his patients, basically.
Yeah, as it should be,
Yeah.
Aaron. There's no question that people's safety needs to be considered. Speaking of safety, apparently Slovakia says that Russian technicians have sabotaged MiG-29 fighters intended for the Ukraine.
Yeah. For those who aren't aware, the MiG-29 fighter, the MiG-29 Fulcrum, as it's known in NATO circles, is one of Russia's mainstays when it comes to air-to-air combat. Now, Russian technicians appear to have sabotaged the Russian jets heading to Ukraine. The defects appear only in parts of the planes that Russians have worked on, the country's defense minister has said. Slovakia has offered its Soviet-era MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine to fight Russia late last month. And Russian technicians appear to have sabotaged those jets headed to Ukraine.
Any word on how they did it?
No, they were able to fly, but it doesn't mean that they were also capable of combat. The defects in those jets that Slovakia was sending to help Ukraine appear to be only on those parts that were accessed by Russians. So they have pilots, spare parts, and the company that's been working on them since Soviet times. Now,
I
the reason
assume.
why, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
The reason why Slovakia and Poland were sending their MiG-29 fighter jets to them is because the Soviet design jets aren't that much different from the ones that Ukraine already has, and they probably most likely be using them as spare parts.
Right.
So,
And the other thing is that I wanted to ask if there was anything in the story that you were following up on. Um, I would assume that before they send these planes to Ukraine, they would check them to make sure they're 100% okay. And I assume this is an assumption on my part that they realized they were sabotaged when they were double checking how they worked, and maybe that's when they realized. And the hope is, if you back Ukraine, which I do, you hope that the problem can be solved, or what you've said, skip to what you said, if they can't fix the airplane, they can still use it for spare parts and not the parts that make it faulty.
Yeah, and basically, they were these technicians who damaged the parts were working on a Slovakian airbase until late 2022. So Slovakia hasn't really had a need to engage in combat operations. So while the planes could still fly, they may not necessarily have been able to engage in combat. So that is, an important thing to note here. I believe the problems should be fixable, but we'll follow up on that in the coming weeks just to see if anything else comes of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Totally get it. All right. Well, that's it for news. Let's talk about the Leafs and Habs game coming up. It doesn't matter where either of these teams sit. They can sit on opposite ends of the standings. They can switch. One's at the top, the other's at the bottom, or they could be somewhere in the middle together, or middle and top, and all those different combinations. It does not matter. Hockey night in Canada, by definition, is the Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens playing in either Toronto or Montreal. Doesn't matter. It is the number one ticket for both those fan bases.
It is one of the hardest games to ever get tickets to. I don't know if you've ever tried, but the last time I actually managed to see the Toronto play Montreal was in a preseason game almost a decade ago
Me
when the
too.
Leafs were still sucking horrifically. That
And
was
that
the
was
only
way
reason I
up
could
there
get
in the
tickets.
Grays. That was at the Gardens for me.
Oh, wow. So that would be going back all the way to
Yep.
1999. Good
But
gravy.
oh no, yeah, Montreal. Yeah, that goes back to then, to Montreal before '89. But I did see a Leaf game. The company I worked for, they had a box, and we watched a Leaf game from a box. Daryl Sittler came up to the box, said hello, and all that kind of stuff. Um, you know, as far as this game is concerned, the Canadians are going to be up. It doesn't matter if it's their American Hockey League team. It's amazing how up you can get for a game, and how well you can play that one moment, that energy level, the way it is. Um, you know, and I think what we're going to see is we're going to see a really interesting battle. I wonder. It's going to be interesting because this Leaf team is nothing like any of the Leaf teams the Montreal Canadiens have played before. When I say that, I talk about the fans again. This team plays with a little more contact. We saw Lafferty do it.
Mhm.
Zach Aston Reese is a pretty big kid. They are more physical, and the physical Montreal Canadiens, as you remember, a few years ago, took out the Maple Leafs in the first round and went on to make it to the Stanley Cup final. So their fans aren't going to be used to the kind of team the Leafs have now. I think it's their first chance to see the more abrasive Maple Leaf team, and that's going to be an interesting little tidbit for the Montreal fans. And it'll be interesting for Leaf fans to watch a Toronto team with a little bit of a different attitude towards Montreal. It won't be a skate them up in the up and down the ice game. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, this is a Montreal team that's sitting currently eighth in their division with 68 points, playing the Toronto Maple Leafs with 103. There's a 35-point differential.
Yeah.
Not only that, there is approximately a 104 goal differential. The Leafs are a positive 48. Montreal is a negative 66.
Wow,
So
that's over
we're
100 swing there goals.
Yeah, this is massive, and it doesn't matter where Montreal sits in the standings; they always seem to get up for these sorts of games. There have been folk that have been saying we basically locked in home ice advantage at this point. Tampa Bay has 3 games left. Those 3 games that they have left, the best that they can do is 102 points. The Leafs currently sit with 103, so we could lose out for the rest of the season. Not the way we'd want to do it, obviously, but the Leafs have the opportunity here to rest players if they want. You can bring up players like Clifford. You can put guys in the lineup like Wayne Simmons and Connor Timmins and You can rest some of your players that actually need it. I can think of about 3 or 4 different Marlies who might actually benefit from having a chance to play up for the Leafs for these last couple of games. You know, you could give rewards to guys like Abruzzese. You can give rewards to guys like Logan Shaw, who spent a lot of time, you know, laboring in the trenches for these guys. You can give Joseph Blandisi a shot. Radim Zahorna has been a wonderful surprise for the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, big dude,
You
big dude.
know, so
Something they don't have much of, size.
exactly. I mean, you could throw Noah Hoffenmeyer in there. You can bring up Carl Dahlstrom, who's 6'4", 222. You even give Philip Kroll a shot. Why not? What have you got to lose? You've got 4 games left. Have some fun with it.
I think that'll be the case if they win. If they win today, but then look forward to the last game or the last 2 games. There's only a couple of games they'll be able to do that in, Aaron, because the last 1 or 2 games, I don't think they want to go in with guys who've been rested just before. You know, well, you know, there's a value judgment needed to be made by the coach and the GM and the staff at the Maple Leafs, and they'll make a decision. You know, for example, what a scary moment it was when Marner went down on a knee and looked at the back of his leg and thought maybe he got sliced. Any slice where he thought it was ends a player for over a year. It could be a year before they come back.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't just miss the playoffs. He would have missed most of next season as well. If you know, as they said on there, they were talking about protective equipment and, you know, grandfathering it in, you know, wearing the cut-proof leotard, you know, wearing that so that that doesn't happen to a player. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And this is the time where, you know, people are nervous. You know, every time a Leaf player goes on the ice now, this is not when you want to see somebody break a finger.
No, this is
It
true.
was bad enough when they did. How did he look for you? How did broken finger look to you?
You know what? Actually, he didn't look very bad at all, considering the fact that they had him working with Achari on the third line, and those 2 guys have some familiarity with each other because they played together in St. Louis. I thought it was a good fit. Here's one thing I've noticed about this Maple Leafs lineup, and I'm very grateful for this. The top 6 and the bottom 6 are all basically within themselves interchangeable.
Absolutely.
You know, so you can blenderize the top 6 and you can blenderize the bottom 6. Where you get into issues is where you have crossover, like Alexander Kerfoot on the left-hand side on the first line. No, don't do that. You know, on the rare occasion, I can see Ryan O'Reilly taking a shift on the second line and having John Tavares play down on the third, maybe. But, you know,
Kerfoot on the fourth line looks good.
Kerfoot on the fourth line looked great. However, a fourth line of Zach Aston Reese, David Kampf, and Sam Lafferty is no fun to play against.
No.
So,
no, he would look good there. With O'Reilly, you know, him being the third center, who could be first line center, gives you a lot of strength down the middle, and that's why he might appear on the third line. And I think that's the reason why they're toying with this 7-11 thing. Because if they put him on the third line, then they can create a fourth line of everybody else. You know, he could be part of a fourth line. Needless to say, Austin Matthews, Nylander, Marner, even Tavares, they could all be on that fourth line. They could put a super line on if they wanted. You know, they're doing. You know, I know you're not a big fan of the blender, but you know what? In the playoffs, nothing works better than a lack of predictability. That's hard to defend against. You know, predictability is your enemy. And the Leafs realize that. And they have players with a level of talent and ability that they can afford to go with, you know, 11 guys. They can. And it creates a lot of competition for those other 2 places on the fourth line, right? So yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I think you're right. I think they're going to rest some players, and it'll be real interesting. And again, thank goodness Marner didn't get hurt there. It was close. I'd hate to see the Leafs go into the playoffs without Marner.
No, that would as a Leafs fan, I got to say that would suck.
That would suck terrible. There was a lot of relief in a lot of people when he didn't come up lame. Let's talk about the Canadian Football League, and let's start with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
So the Winnipeg Blue Bombers went out and they signed themselves a wide receiver by the name of Gavin Garner. and a Canadian offensive lineman named Tyler Grosolia. Garner, at 6'5" and 220, was at rookie mini camps with the Eagles and New Orleans Saints last spring. He finished his 5-year collegiate career at Northwestern Oklahoma State with 149 receptions for 2,400 yards and 25 touchdowns, which is awesome. Grizola is 6'3", 305 pounds, just for 7 games with the U of T Blues last year, and most recently attended the CFL's Invitational Combine at the University of Waterloo in early March.
Let's talk about Calgary. The Stampeders sign.
They signed an American defensive back by the name of Devontae Cross. He was originally with the Washington Commanders as an undrafted free agent in 2022, and that year attended training camp and saw preseason action with the Green Bay Packers. Most recently, he was in the USFL with the Philadelphia Stars. He made 34 starts over 5 years at Virginia with the Cavs. There's also another player that Calgary signed by the name of Caleb Benenoch, who's a veteran of 36 NFL games, started 23, and was a fifth-round selection of the Tampa Bay Bucks in 2016.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the NBA. The season's beginning to wind down. The Raptors are looking to make the play-in or play out, whichever way you want to call it.
So we're getting to that. We're getting to a bit of a silly season here. This is where teams that didn't finish in the playoffs start musing about getting rid of coaches, and even teams that are in the playoffs have also considered, potentially getting rid of coaches as well. This last campaign has been not a lot of fun for the Raptors. There's been a lot of trade speculation and mounting uncertainty concerning the futures of Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, and Gary Trent Jr. Not only that, Nick Nurse has been sort of planting the seeds, I guess, of a possible departure from Toronto of his own volition. Now, this goes along with the fact that the Raptors have been rather open about, where he fits currently with the organization. Ume Udoka, who's a former Boston head coach, was a finalist back when Nurse was ultimately chosen for the position, so he's a possibility. Houston Rockets are also looking around for a new coach, and it's been mentioned that he might go there.
Pascal Siakam is the latest Raptor to complain about sports betting and the effect it has on fans.
More specifically, he's looking at the way that fans behave. Particularly when it comes to point spreads and players taking shots and missing shots. Like he says he's getting messages about people who are being nasty about him, wishing death on him because they couldn't complete a parlay. And it's like, dude, I don't care. I'm just here to play my game. I really don't care if you make money or not.
Absolutely.
One of those things that can be distressing for players.
Let's talk about the Blue Jays. They win 3 straight after losing 3 straight.
Yeah, it was not a rough start to the season. We didn't look at our best for the opening series. Glad to see that they've managed to get themselves get their feet back under themselves. Sorry, they won their third straight over the Royals 6-3 yesterday. Kevin Gausman had 6 scoreless innings. Vladdy Guerrero Jr. and Kevin Biggio both had home runs. Gausman gave up just 4 hits to the Royals and struck out 7. So that's a good sign.
Joel Armia gets his second hat trick, helps to beat the Capitals 6-2.
Yeah, so the Capitals haven't been having a good time this season so far. This is, I think, the first time in over a decade that they'll be missing the playoffs. It doesn't necessarily mean that the team is cooked or that the team is done. It just means that they may be getting a little too long in the tooth, or after a quick refresh at this season and maybe a little bit longer of a break, Ovi will come back even stronger and they'll be right back in it.
I just realized this because I was going to say the Panthers scratched the Senators to the tune of 7-2, but I guess you could say the Lion and the Panthers scratched Ottawa 7-2.
Yeah, Alex Lyon actually had a franchise record in that particular game. He ended up with 56 saves, which passes the mark of 53 set by Craig Anderson. he was stepping in for the injured Sergei Bobrovsky. That game was a treat to watch. It was Brady versus Matthew. It was a game filled with a lot of physicality. Two fights in the same sequence. The net getting knocked over. One of the Kachucks sitting on a goalie. All the fun stuff that you come to expect from a game like that.
No kidding. Just insert first name. Because both of them will do the same thing given the chance.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the Flames and Jets, who are really having it out face to face. Who's going to be in the playoffs? Who isn't?
So Markster made 34 saves, and Andrew Mangiapane and Nikita Zadorov each had a goal and an assist as the Flames managed to keep their playoff hopes alive. They've been going back and forth with wins and losses over the course of the past week or so. It's almost like they're on life support at this point here, but they managed to get a 3-1 win over the Jets. With the Oilers firmly ensconced in second place now in their division, there's still a lot of infighting going on for those remaining spots.
The Oilers' Nugent Hopkins becomes the third Oiler to reach 100 points, something that hasn't happened since Pittsburgh did it a few years ago.
And by few, we mean at least a couple decades.
Absolutely.
But yeah, he's the third Edmonton skater to reach 100 points this season. Edmonton's actually currently on a 12-game point streak. It's definitely a milestone, but he joins Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in reaching the century mark. Now, as we mentioned, it has been decades. The last time that happened was Lemieux, Yager, and Francis back in 1995, 1996. So it's been a while since that sort of thing has happened.
The Canucks Stamko earns his third career shutout.
So in a surprise to no one, Vancouver did actually manage to beat Chicago, who were coming off a win against Calgary the couple nights before. But Demko played spectacularly, getting that shutout going there. And it's their first shutout in 133 games. So it's been well over a season and a half. He faced 33 shots and stopped them all. So congratulations to him on that.
How about irony, Aaron? Go to the news a little bit. This week, we had what happened in Nashville, and then we had the situation where 2 out of 3 Democrats who were up to be voted and suspended and taken out of the Nashville lower house, they were voted out. Ironically, on the same day that Martin Luther King was assassinated. And the question becomes, is this about racism? Another event that happened at that time was also back in 1970. I think it was 70. I don't think it was 71 or 70. Around there anyway, in the early 70s. It's also the anniversary of Donald Trump going to court along with his father. It's really ironic. And then, of course, he's going into the court where the 5 young black men who he wanted the death penalty for, it turned out they were innocent. All these dates come crashing in, and we're actually seeing. And I wanted to say this before we ran out of time, and then you can talk. I'm old enough to remember the '60s, and what I'm seeing right now, what's going on in America, we're going back to the '60s. I have a real '60s feel of what was going on. I think we're going to create the new version of hippies, like protesting and that kind of stuff is going to become very average. It's going to be average. There are so many things for people to complain about, Aaron. Is it just me, an old man, saying something that, damn, those young kids just don't know what they're doing?
I don't think so. I'll be honest with you. Of the representatives that were kicked out, the only one who didn't was a 60-year-old white woman. So, and even she herself said it's pretty clear why the state Republicans expelled her, but she kept it. She's fairly open about that in the press conference that she actually had today. But yeah, Justin Pearson and Justin Jones were out on Thursday. Gloria Johnson stayed in. It was interesting that it shouldn't come to this. You're advocating for the people that voted for you. The only people that should have the right to remove you from office are the people who voted you in the first place. This sort of thing that the Tennessee House is doing is undemocratic. It runs counter to American values. It flies in the face of every single piece of logic that you could possibly have when it comes to this sort of thing. And the people that voted 72-25 to expel Jones and to expel Pearson ought to be ashamed of themselves. This is not the way America is supposed to behave.
And then you've got Santos and Green in New York.
Those two should be out for entirely different reasons.
But both those two are candidates for being yanked out. If decorum is important in a state house or anywhere, I mean, everybody's seen the meme of her beside the. I don't even want to say the name of the animal, but anyway, it's something that needs to stop. Aaron, listen, it was a pleasure, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me, Frank.
Always appreciate your opinion, and thanks for being a part of this. I don't have you; you're part of this. I have to have him take some of the responsibility. I can't carry all the blame myself for what goes on here. For Aaron William Freeland, I'm Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching Candid Frank's Leaf Talk, seen live Fridays at 6 p.m. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For Leaf Talk, other news and entertainment, sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. And of course, don't forget Candid Frank Stanisci 1030 on YouTube, and you can follow and watch some of the other stuff that I do. It's coming, folks. Playoff hockey's around the corner. See you next time.